Hey everybody, it's Jamie here, and I wanted to post a video of something that I thought was pretty important for those of you who are piper owners. And I know that some of you watch my videos. There's a few of you me flying up to the Outer Banks and whatnot on the coast of North Carolina here, and I should be getting ready to get out of here should Dorian kind of come up onto the land here where it's supposed to hit, because I'm right near the Outer Banks in New Bern, North Carolina. And we have a little bit of a warning going on here, but just more importantly, my airplane is grounded. I was going to try to get to Triple Tree this weekend after the storm passed, and it turns out that I was trying to do some maintenance. I was going to change out a couple of items, and we noticed that there was a little bit of a bigger problem. And I wanted to show you some of the things that I found, so that for those of you who have this airplane, you might want to check it out. And if you start seeing some of the symptoms that I've seen, you can kind of cut it off at the pass and maybe not have as much to do. But let me just show you what I got here. First of all, I was going to change a couple of these things. So let me show you what I got here. These things right here, this is like a gasket or like a metal flange. It's a no-blow flange that actually sits right on top of the exhaust as it comes out of the cylinder head, right? And this was lodged, this was in there like this, and I noticed, I don't know if you can see it here. Let me actually get the light so maybe you can see it a little bit better. But what I noticed was that there was a lot of, I don't know, there was a lot of powdery residue that was coming out of like the cylinder, right where it connects, as you can see, like right up in there, okay? And when I had one of my mechanics look at it, noticed that, it was kind of, there was a little bit of, powdery residue coming out of here, which means there was an exhaust leak somewhere. And I agreed, so I said, all right, let's change some of these things. So what I ended up getting, let me go around here and get them. Oh, by the way, this is like a little bit of the view of the FBO down there and some of the clouds that are coming in from Dorian, I guess. Well, Dorian's way down by Florida now, so I think it's probably down by some of you guys that live down there, so hopefully you're safe. But I have a nice little hangar here with a door finally. I used to be over in the hangars, I don't know if you can see them, like way over there, which don't have any doors on them, but that's for another time. So anyway, let me show you what I bought. I actually bought some of these things right here, which, as I mentioned, are no-blow gaskets or flanges, whatever you want to call them. I don't know. I'm not a mechanic, but as you can see from this one, and I'm sorry, I'm holding my my camera at the same time that I'm trying to show you what these things are. But let me show you the difference between the two of these, and you can probably see a very distinct difference of how much corrosion. Now, this might have just been a shitty flange or whatever. These are the better ones. I was told by my mechanic you want the no-blow ones, so these are probably going to be a lot better. But what I discovered, and if I could kind of show you what I found, because I saw it immediately. I didn't even have to. Honestly, I didn't even need the mechanic to tell me, because I knew right away. But let me get this stuff out of the way first, because it's going to be in my way here. But let me show you what I found when I pulled this thing off. I don't know if you can see that up in there, but that, I don't know if you can see right in there, there is a big crack in the cylinder head. I don't know if you can see that. Right, like right where the light is shining there. And it goes up into it. And that was giving me some symptoms that I think I wasn't really sure of until now. And seeing this, I don't know if you can see it in there. I hope you can. But there's a big crack right on that side towards the fuselage, and big crack. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best, because I'm the type of individual who's pretty handy with most things, and I learn pretty quickly. So I wouldn't say my instructor, but my mechanic was certainly okay with me maybe taking off everything that I need to do to remove this. And as you can see, I've already removed all of the exhaust pipes from going into the muffler here by taking those off. And what I was going to do was kind of just, as you can see, I was going to put these brand new ones on there and call it a day. So I just bought 4 of them, and they're going to go on. That's new, right? They're the new ones that are going to go on there. And when I found that out, it's kind of a problem. It's like, oh geez. But as you can see, it was actually starting to fray my leads here that go to the, let me see if I can get my light again. It's starting to fray my leads there, if you can see, right? It kind of frayed the little shield, well, not the shielding, but the, I guess the wiring that kind of goes around the front of it that, from my understanding, I think it prevents that from getting in the way of your radios and stuff. I guess it's some of the shielding, but I didn't like that anyway, so these are going to be swapped out pretty soon too. My annual's coming up in a couple of months, so in November, so I'm thinking I might just do it then. Because I got two brand new magnetos here, this one and that one over on the other side, and you know, so they work pretty well. They're perfect. It's just that the leads, they look kind of crappy, and you know, I'm kind of like others who I converse with online, like Brian and others that you know, I like my stuff to look new and kept up very well. So it's kind of a pretty pricey item actually. These leads are about $400-500, and it costs about maybe the same to probably put them on, because they have to fit them and they have to make sure everything is you know, set up correctly so that they're all, you know, there's not any extraneous or superfluous wiring that's going on in here. But luckily, this is the only one that I have to change right here. We looked up in the other cylinders, and it looks like they're okay. So what I did was I got a couple of tools here from my mechanic over here who's going to let me use a few of these things. And what I was going to do was maybe make a little bit of a short instructional video on how I'm taking this thing off, or what I'm doing to prepare for that. So I'm not quite sure from the looks of this how sophisticated I can get with this, but I think I can prepare as much as possible, like by taking off maybe the, you know, the baffling here and maybe some of the screws, and just kind of consult every once in a while with my mechanic and see what else I might be able to do to you know, get this thing ready to go, so that they can kind of swap it out with another one. And luckily my mechanic has one that is sort of used and has a little bit of you know, wear on it, but not it's about as much wear as the engine has on it, since it's overhaul, which is about 650 hours. And I've flown it about maybe 60-70 hours this year since I bought it last August, so I think it's probably time for me to get into the engine and see what's going on there anyway. But yeah, so what I was going to do is just kind of try to take some of these things off and see what's involved with this, and then remove these sparks right here, and see what that entails, and hopefully that's not going to be much of an issue, and then I'll just let the guys tell me what to do from there. So hopefully it's not going to be too much of an issue, but I'll keep you posted, and I'll show you along the way what it is that I'm doing, and the progress that I've made, and hopefully you can just make a nice short video for those of you who are interested. I'm going to start with this baffling right here, and once I get that done, I'll just come back, okay? So we'll see you soon. All right, so we're back, and as you can see here, I've got a couple of the screws out from this baffling here, so I'm going to take the rest of these out, and also show you that I took some of these, you know, the leads off of the spark plugs, and that's easy enough to do, so I don't think that's too terribly, you know, difficult to explain. But what I'm about to do is to run a little bit. As you can see here, there's a little bit of a strip screw in there, and that's the only one that's holding that, you know, getting that off there, or holding it on. I need to get that off, so I brought my Dremel tool, and I'm going to put a little flathead ridge in there so that I can get that out of there. Then I'm going to have to take this out right here so that this whole thing can be removed. And under here, I'm going to have to probably take those two screws out right there. And I'm going to let them do all of this right here. This is the oil drain that goes back into the engine. And I'm going to let them take that off. And they apparently have to take this one off too. Now, one of the things that I've found is that this little pan here, this was attached to, I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if you can see it. This thing right here. And there's, I don't know if you can see, let me see if I can get my light down in there. Yeah, and down in there you can see that there's like a little, let me see if I can get this to stay, hold on. Sorry, I should have been a little bit more prepared with this today. But if you can check that out down there, there's a little hook here that kind of holds that pan. And this pan underneath here, like right there, as you can see, this thing, That right there needs to come out, apparently. I don't know how I'm going to get that out of there, but one of the things that my mechanic told me is that this bar right here, I don't know if you can see it, but this bar right here, this bar right there is like a, it's like a little bar that holds the baffling on, and it kind of goes right in there as well. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe it's better if I do it under here. This little thing right here, and there's a spot like right. There's a spot. Hold on, let me see if I can get the damn light going there. There we go. You can see that little screw right hanging out right here. That thing needs to come out so that I can release this baffling right on the top. So that's kind of a process, and as you can see, it's a different day today. It's actually the next day. As we wait Dorian to come up here in North Carolina, which is going to hit probably New Bern, you know, Wilmington, Jacksonville, New Bern, which is kind of my neck of the woods here. And, you know, I'm going to try to get this baffling off and then try to prepare as much of this as possible so the mechanic guys can take a look at the, you know, take a look at the cylinder head and get that thing out of there. Okay, so I'll report back when I get the baffling off. Alright everybody, so I just went over and talked to my mechanic, and some of these are really difficult to get, and what I'm going to show you is a couple of the screws that need to come out. Namely, those, I got the top one down, but the screw down there, which is held on by kind of, as you can see, there's a screw underneath there that kind of guide the leads over to the spark plugs, and that little nut right there is kind of a really big problem to get to because there's all this stuff in the way. So, and also these two over here, which I'm going to have to take out right there to get this whole baffling out. And as I mentioned, you know, trying to get up in there where this bar is. Let me see if I can get up there. That bar right there, which is just above where the oil goes back into, like these things right here, these two. There's a bar right up here. See, I don't know if you see that little bar, but there's right over here. There's a screw, a little bit of a screw in, well, not a screw, but a. Geez, this is. I can't get the light in there. There we go. That thing right there, that little nut that's holding on that's gonna release the baffling. I got to get that in there, and these are not easy to get at. And the last thing I want to do is to have to take my the front cowling off to get the whole thing off, because that's going to be a pain in the ass. I'm going to have somebody help me with the, you know, the prop and the spinner and all that stuff, and that's the last thing I wanted to do.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the video here just for a moment so I can provide some commentary on something I just mentioned in the video moments ago, and also provide a little bit of update on what's going on here. But first of all, this is a new experience for me, and at the time of this recording, this voiceover, the work has actually been done. It's been completed, and there were a couple of diversions along the way that I'll mention. I was working with the good folks over at Tradewind Aviation Maintenance at the New Bern Airport. Ricky is the head mechanic there, and I'm lucky enough to be working with them because Ricky believes very strongly that owners should be involved in a lot of their airplane operations, even when it comes to maintenance. So he allowed me to do an owner-assisted project here with this cylinder, and it has been a wealth of information and understanding of how this thing works and what the things are, and it's just a confidence builder. You know, being out of the pilot seat, you know, out of the cockpit, it's a confidence builder because you know, you really should get your hands dirty. Even if you're not necessarily handy, I suggest finding a mechanic that will allow you to take some things apart and put it back together again, because it's really a very telling experience. Now, onwards with what I wanted to mention. I did mention just moments ago in the video that last thing I wanted to do is take the cowling off in the prop. Well, guess what? In my newfound experience, which is very minimal to say the least, I did learn a lot from this, and one of the things that I would do right off the bat is to just take the entire cowling off, take the prop off. So for those of you who are going to be needing to access the engine compartment, you know, I have common sense, but I was thinking, you know, if I'm taking this cylinder out, maybe I could just take this baffling off, and maybe I could just take it off here and not have to disrupt anything over on the other side or whatever. Well, that doesn't really work out with aircraft engines that well. So my suggestion right off the bat is take the entire cowling off, take the front, take the prop off, take the flywheel, everything. because your life is going to be made much easier by all the things that you have to get into here just to take the baffling off. Now, another suggestion that I have is you see that screw hole right here. That was one that gave me a little bit of trouble because I was trying to take off this little plate right here. Well, this is all kind of connected in there, and it would have been a nightmare trying to, get the mechanic, to put this cylinder on and test everything and do everything with this baffling on there. So once I got into this, I was like, you know what, I'm just taking the whole thing off. So we took the prop off, the cowling off, the baffling, half of it all the way over to here, and then just kind of took it off and flipped it over onto the other side because we didn't really need to do anything over there. Now, one of the things I will say is only take off the screws and the wing nuts that are binding it to the engine block. Don't try to take off any of the screws inside. It's just going to cause you more work later on for something that you don't need to do. Okay, it will allow you much better access, and let me go to the next picture here. It's going to allow you much better access to that little bar that I told you about, like underneath, right? So that little bar underneath that holds the baffling on, you do have to take that off, and that wing nut right here in the little spacer, that is really difficult to access. And on the other side is another wing nut like this that is difficult to access if you do not have the front cowling off. So I would suggest very strongly going ahead and taking all that off as well. So, so that you can access this. Now, here's another image of my engine compartment on the right side, on the passenger side. And that bar that goes underneath there, you could just barely see it here. If you take the front cowling off, really one of the only things that's holding that front cowling on there is the rest of the cowling and this little ditty right here, this little bar. So you just go in there and take that bar off. I believe it connects to something on the cowling up here. I'm not quite sure. Maybe no, I don't think it's the cowling. I think it's actually the baffling. The baffling is being held by this little bar right there, and then the cowling is held on by the rest of the cowling. So there's really nothing holding the cowling on except the rest of the cowling, like the top flaps and the underneath part that goes on the bottom. So my suggestion is just take all of that off so that the baffling is not in your way. These right here, these oil stems right here, those come off, believe it or not, really easily. You just take a little bit of a wrench there and just kind of pull them off, and they just come right out of there. And I think if I let me pull up this picture that we had before, that's where these go right here. If you just loosen these, I learned those just pull out of there. They're really not in there any kind of tight or whatever. But again, getting these things out of the way is going to give you much better access to getting this off, which then will allow you access to get the baffling off. Now, if I pull up this picture one more time, I will say that you are required to take off that oil stem. You are the oil dipstick stem. You do have to do that. You cannot get this baffling off unless you take that stem off. So you probably have to cut the safety wire down underneath and then just take a big wrench. I think it's a 3/4 inch wrench, and then just kind of pop it over. Hopefully it's not on so tightly that you have to really crank it, but mine wasn't, luckily. But you just pull it out of there. Make sure you have something to wipe off the dipstick, and then I stuck a rag in there just so that no moisture or any other foreign debris would get in there, and that's what I did on the intakes as well down here. But that's the reason for this voiceover, is because I absolutely would be required to take every single bit of the cowling and the prop off to access this engine. So for those of you who are not too new at this, and you say, "Oh yeah, of course, dummy," but these two screws right there are the ones that would need to come off as well to get the baffling good to go. And you'd have to hold a screw from the top of the top of the cowling, to hold it while you unscrewed these. And lastly, this little thing right here, if you do have this, tube right here, that is your on your pipers, that is your what do they call that? The primer. And right here is this little bar, or this, not a bar, but like a clamp that has a screw on the other side that you will have to undo. And I know you can barely see it, but that little square right there behind there, that's a spacer to keep the line away from the intake. And it's not too hot. The intake obviously isn't too hot, but it does keep it nice and distance away from that, so it's not like metal on metal and wearing away. So that's your primer. And one of the things that I did want to mention is that upon further inspection, once we got these things off, this cylinder over here had a crack in it in the same exact place. So I don't know what it is about these cylinders. I know a couple weeks ago I was watching video tag along with Chet. I don't know if you watch him, but he had the same problem, and it was almost on the same day that I watched that video that we found out that this was a problem. And I think his Piper is the same year as mine. I think it's a '67. So I don't know if it's because of wear and tear or the blowtorch that's going through this, just wearing away that metal. But it was cracked in exactly the same spot in exactly the same amount. So I had to replace both of these. Now, as I mentioned in the video before, my mechanic happened to have a couple of these laying around on a plane that he had bought that he replaced them, and they were in pretty good shape, and they had about as many hours on it as my engine does, about 500-600 hours. And you can see that the corrosion around this was just not very good. So take these off. You take the intake pipes off. This is where your mixture comes through and burns up. And I took those off. And these nuts are a little bit tough to get through, and to get to. And I think one of the subsequent images that you'll see are a couple of those universal joints that you'll have to use to get in there. Some of the tools that you need are definitely specific. I had to borrow a lot of the mechanics tools, and they were so kind to let me do that. But I think that's all I wanted to do in this video, was just to provide a little bit of commentary as to what was going on with what I had learned after the fact, and maybe provide a little bit of time saver for you folks if you ever have to do this and you've never done it before. Just a little bit of a tutorial, perhaps. Of course, I'm not a mechanic, so don't take this as gospel. I'm a newbie, okay? So just go to your mechanic and make sure that you can do these things under his supervision, which is what I did, and learn a little bit. But don't certainly take this as educational, because it is not. It's just my experience and what I learned from it, and maybe if it helps you consult with your mechanic a little bit more fluently, then so be it. Okay, so we'll continue the rest of this pretty short video. I think there's only about a minute left on the video proper, and then we'll move on with a couple of other things. Okay, thanks.
To prep this to, get this cylinder head in. So what I've done, went over and got my buddies over there. It's always good to make friends with your mechanic, is to get some of these jointed sockets here, so I can kind of fit that in there. And these are pretty expensive little buggers too, and I'm trying to find them like at Lowe's and Home Depot, but they just don't carry them. I think you have to get these kind of special order. So I'm going to take these screws off right here, and also these, and I'm going to undo that baffling underneath, and hopefully once I get that done, it should take me about maybe 15 minutes or so to do that. I'll come back and show you a little bit of an update. Okay, so it's just a little bit of an update of what I'm up against here with these screws and bolts or nuts that are really tough to get if you just have a straight socket. So I'll be right back.